Okay, good morning. Hope you enjoyed the video. There's so many great songs out there, aren't there? So, yes, as you can see from the slide, I'm going to be talking today about digesting unfairness in life. And we're continuing on our series on spiritual laws. We've been talking about this for about a month and a half now. This is the last message because next week is Easter. Easter Sunday came quickly this year. But we've been talking about spiritual laws because we just felt that it was really important for us to be reminded that, for us to remind ourselves that God designed with a purpose. He designed intentionally. And this world is all built around laws of physics and laws of gravity and laws of all kinds of laws of relationships. And so it would make sense that there are spiritual laws as well. And so we've covered a lot of really good material. I hope that you've all gotten something out of it. And so today I'll talk a little bit about what law I'm talking about a little bit later. So the reason that I decided to talk about this today was because I had a really great conversation with somebody last week. And she was telling me about how she had a very difficult experience maybe 3 or 4 months ago. And it was, she really struggled a lot with something that somebody had told her here at the church. And she went through this kind of process of trying to digest that experience and what that person told her. Her original response was kind of, her original feeling and emotion was kind of, want to run away or don't want to deal with this. But then she said that after a period of time, she started to really recognize that she's always run away from her problems. And she wanted to confront it. She wanted to, and she recognized that a lot of the frustration that she was feeling was coming from herself. It wasn't what this person told her, but it was her own emotions, her own conscience, these things. And she recognized that she could recognize that what this person was saying was actually out of care and love, and she could accept it for that. And as she was telling me this story, I was like, wow, this is really cool. This is a really amazing story because it's in concept, it's easy to overcome a situation. You know, someone tells you something you don't like, or you don't appreciate, and maybe you don't like it at first, but you overcome yourself and you become a better person, right? That's kind of like the storybook experience. But in reality, it's actually really hard to do. And sometimes, in reality, it's very hard to do. And this is really important for us because in life, as you've all experienced and as I've experienced, things happen to us that we feel are very unfair. Sometimes things just happen to us, whether it's like in the video you saw, people dealing with sickness or some kind of physical attack or something like that, or other challenges that we have in our families, our relationships, our could be financial. There's so many different things that we can be challenged with in our life. Faith challenges, and many times we just feel like we're just trying to live our life. We're just trying to do the best we can with what we have, and things happen to us. We didn't ask for them. We don't feel like we deserve them, and it just feels very unfair. Like the little boy there who feels like he should have gotten his fair share of cake. So unfair things happen to us in our life, all of us. Some of us have things and we just feel like, yeah, this is really frustrating or whatever. Some of us look at our life and we just feel like it's a big steaming pile of garbage. It's like, what did I do to deserve having to be left with this lot in my life? But what I'm going to be talking about today is, regardless of what we are given in our life, our ability to digest that unfairness and our attitude during those times is what's going to actually determine whether we live a life of growth and prosperity or not. So I'm going to be talking today, starting off from this parable from the Bible. It's the parable of the workers in the vineyard. So if you know this parable, it's a pretty simple one. So Jesus is talking in Matthew in the Bible, and he's sharing to the people this story. And in the story, there's a landowner, and he has a vineyard, and he needs workers for his vineyard. So he goes out, he says early in the morning, I'm guessing probably 5 or 6 a.m., and he finds some people, some workers. And he says, I'll pay you a day's wage if you come and work in my vineyard. So they're like, okay, that seems fair, right? So then he goes out again at 9 o'clock in the morning, and he finds more people, and he says, if you come work in my vineyard, I'll pay you a day's wage. And then he goes out again at noon, and then he goes again at 3, and then he goes again at 5. Every time he goes out, he finds more people to work in his vineyard. And then the end of the day comes. I don't know what that is at that time, maybe 6, maybe 7, maybe 9, I don't know what's considered a full day's work. But he says, line up to receive your wage for your pay for your day's work. And it's kind of interesting. He says, those people who came last line up first. And then it goes into this part. The workers who were hired about 5 in the afternoon came, and each received a denarius. So when those came who were hired first, they expected to receive more, but each one of them also received a denarius. When they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. These who were hired last only worked 1 hour, they said, and you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the work and the heat of the day. But he answered one of them, I am not being unfair to you, friend. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the one who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you envious because I am generous? So the last will be first, and the first will be last. Matthew chapter 20. So it's an interesting story. Even though the workers who were there all day and worked in the hot sun and everything received what they were promised, they felt it was so unfair because the people who came later in the day, especially the people who came and only worked 1 hour, got the same pay as them. Doesn't make any sense. In their mind, if they worked longer, then they should get paid more. And I think that this is a very interesting story because I'm sure that Jesus wasn't just trying to share a story about what it means to be fair. He was trying to express the heart of God. And it can be really easy to fall into this trap, especially as people of faith, which is who I think Jesus was talking to. That if we have been working for God, if we have been sacrificing for God, if we have been dedicated our life to God and we've worked our butts off for God for 50 years or 60 years or whatever it is, that somehow we should get some kind of a special treatment by God. And it's unfair if a person who squeezes in at the last minute gets the same benefit that I do because they didn't work as hard as I did. We had an interesting experience a few years ago. I've never talked about this experience publicly, really, but it's been a few years, and felt like there was some value in the message. But a few years ago, and this person's not around anymore, but an elder member invited us to breakfast. And we went to a restaurant, and I wasn't really sure how the conversation was going to go. But we sat down, and I've never had a conversation like that before. For about 2 hours, he shared with us about all of our problems. He shared with us about how my wife and I aren't actually really united as a couple. And he shared about how we don't really respect the elder members, and that the members who have been here a long time and have sacrificed a lot deserve special treatment, and many, many, many things. And I left that conversation feeling really like, what was that? Because we're like living our life, doing our thing, and that was kind of like an experience just totally unexpected. And I felt a little bit like that was really unfair. I don't feel like most of the things he said were justified, although I think that when someone talks to you like that, it's good to reflect on yourself and to ask yourself, where can I take responsibility? What could I have done better? How could I have, maybe I do need to learn more respect, these kinds of things. And so it's a good opportunity to be introspective and to practice some humility. At the same time, it really did feel unfair. But it was a good experience in a lot of ways, because we cannot escape unfair situations and circumstances in our life. They're going to happen to us. Some things are going to feel really unfair and just really terrible and crazy, and like, what in the world did I do to deserve this? And some things might be more like minor inconveniences or something like that. But we're all going to experience things that feel, what did I do to deserve this? I've tried to live my life the best that I can. But the thing I want to talk about today is that we can't avoid those unfair experiences, but we can choose how we're going to deal with those experiences. And if we can deal with them in the way that God set up for us to deal with in this time of restoration, this time of providence of restoration, then we can actually receive a lot of blessing from it. So I think that naturally we don't look for discomfort. We don't look for difficult experiences in our life. Nobody wants to live that way. But if we always try to avoid uncomfortable situations, then we don't grow. I don't think that God gives us difficult experiences for I don't know, whatever reason. But I do believe that God uses those experiences, if we can have a grateful heart and if we can have a humble heart, to do things in this world. We could spend our whole life trying to make unfair things that happen to us in our life fair. I know many people who they feel like they've been wronged in their life in some way. They feel like they've been hurt in their life, or they've been judged in their life, or they were misunderstood in their life in some way. And they will spend an incredible amount of energy and time, maybe their whole life, trying to make that unfair thing fair. Whether it's by, trying to hurt someone back, or ignoring that person, or trying to get back at whatever kind of, whatever you felt wronged you, trying to get back in some way. But the theme of unfairness comes up a lot in the Bible. A lot. Which isn't surprising, because we live in a world with a lot of problems. But whether you look at the story of Adam and Eve, where Lucifer felt unfairly treated by God, not loved by God, or whether you look at the story of Cain and Abel, where God accepted Abel's sacrifice and not Cain's, and Cain felt that was unfair, or whether you look at the story of Jacob and Esau, and Jacob stole Esau's birthright, and Esau felt that was unfair, and then Jacob went to live with his uncle, and his uncle mistreated him, and he felt that was unfair. It was like, there's so many stories of unfairness in the Bible. And then, of course, you go to the parable of the workers, the parable of the prodigal son. The son goes and wastes his inheritance, comes back and begs for forgiveness from his father. Father takes him in, and the brother who has been working there his whole life is like, what the heck? You never threw a festival for me. You never killed the fatted cow for me. Stories of people feeling like, I was treated unfairly. How can I overcome? How can I make it right? So ultimately, Jesus also bore that cross. In 1 Peter, it says, he himself bore our sins in his body on the tree, that we might die to sin and live to righteousness. By his wounds you have been healed. So you look at Jesus' life, and you think, Jesus took responsibility. He took responsibility for the people who were persecuting him, the people who liked him but didn't understand him, like his disciples. He took responsibility for even the people that he never met. And even though people treated him so unfairly and persecuted him for trying to do the right thing, he took responsibility to love those people. He took responsibility to give his life for those people. He didn't deserve that. He didn't do anything to deserve to being treated the way he was treated. But he was treated that way anyway, so he had a choice. He could resent those people. He could hate those people. He could try to get back at those people. Or he could practice what God has always practiced and love those people, have compassion for those people. The divine principle shows us that God's path, not because he prefers it this way, but that's the way it's always been, but God's path with his people has always been to receive persecution, to be attacked, to be blamed, to be treated unfairly. But then when his people forgive, maintain gratitude, love anyway, have compassion, then God uses that to change people's hearts. God uses that to advance his providence, one step at a time. When people overcome their feelings of anger and jealousy and rage and forgive. Why? Because God, even though God is God, can't just give us unlimited, unwarranted blessings. God needs us to fulfill our part of the equation. This is an excerpt from one of our founders, Reverend Moon's speeches, where he's talking about this. He says, how about Satan's strategy or evil people's strategy? An evil person stomps on others in order to gain success. A good person serves others in order to get along. Then naturally, other people want to come to him. Such a person will be elevated as the central person. Therefore, through this method, they can occupy others without fighting. This is God's method. He tries to serve first in order to get along well. He never has been defeated. Look at the past lives of saints. They walked a history of being beaten. However, the descendants of the nation that persecuted them eventually came around to becoming the servants of the saints as a result. This is how progress has been made. This is the real fact of history. This is a fundamental principle. A person who causes harm is evil. On the other hand, if you are harmed first, you are good. If the person who is unjustly harmed continues the path without saying a word, he will inherit all the good fortune from all the people who harmed him. Without ever fighting back, Jesus knew this path very well. This is the logical conclusion, observing all facts in life. So, when we experience hardships or unfairness in life, which we all have and we all will in the future, We can get stuck trying to make it right. We can get stuck trying to make sure that that person or that thing understands where they went wrong or what they did that hurt me so badly, or try to get back in them in some way. But that's a dead end. There's no growth there. There's no happiness there. There's no future in that way of thinking. It just perpetuates itself over and over and over. Because you can never really make things fair. I mean, they used to have a way of doing that, right? An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But we could try to live that way by making sure that all things are equal. But you can't. You can't make things fair if you were born under certain circumstances, if you have certain kind of parents you didn't wish you had, or certain kind of kids you didn't wish you have, or certain kind of job you didn't wish you had, or whatever. You can only do so much to change the circumstances in your life, right? You can only do so much to change. You can't change what you're born with. You can't change what kind of character you were given. You can't change the things that you were given to work with in your life. But if we look at history and we look at God and we look at the providence and everything, then I think it's fair to say that God is the most unfair. God has been treated the most unfairly in his life. All God wanted to do was to create a good world. He wanted to create a loving world that was a heaven on earth with loving families. Don't think that God intended for us to have to deal with, wars and disease and suffering like so many people deal with in their life. He wanted to create a good, that's all he really wanted to do. God didn't turn his back on us. We turned our backs on God. So God didn't create this situation. So God could easily feel like, well, this is unfair to me. All I wanted to do was something good, something wonderful. And you guys screwed it all up. So you need to fix it. But God doesn't have that attitude with us. He could. But God has sympathy. God has compassion. God loves his children, and he's been working, doing everything he can do to restore this world since that point. He determined at that point that he would restore this world. He would restore his children. Jesus personified. He embodied that heart of willingness to want to sacrifice, not for the sake of making things fair or to make things even, but so that one further step could be taken towards God's original dream, even if it meant that he had to bear the brunt of an unfair treatment. So if God has that attitude to love us and to have compassion on us and have sympathy on us, even if we turn our backs on God, even if we blame God for our problems in our life, even if we resent God or we say, I hate you, then if God does that, then maybe it's a cue for us to look at our life and to think, how can I practice that more in my life? Because it's really easy to place blame. It's really easy to resent and to look at a situation from our point of view and to think, that's so unfair. But if we look at what God has done, and we look at our life, and we look at what we really want in our life, then we have to go God's way. We have to be like our Heavenly Father in the spirit world, in heaven, and live the way that he has taught us to live by example. And that is by having compassion. That is by having forgiveness. That is by giving grace. And we can't expect to make things fair, but we can take responsibility for a situation, even if we didn't feel like we deserved it or we did something to warrant it. We can take responsibility. We can forgive. We can give grace. We can make things right. Maybe not necessarily in the sense of maybe all things are equal, but in our life, for God, to take a step forward instead of getting stuck, we can do that. And I believe that if we walk that way, and if these things that we are sharing are true, then we receive the blessing. We receive the merit because we are walking the same path that God is walking. We are living the way that God, spiritual law that God has created, that we can thrive even in unfair circumstances. Okay, that's my message. Please, wait. Yeah, I'll pray first. Thank you. Dearest Heavenly Parent, we are so grateful to be here this morning. We know that each one of us carries some burdens, carries some baggage in life, some unfair circumstances that we feel that we've been given that we don't want. But Heavenly Parent, I really hope that this morning we can connect to you, we can connect to Jesus, we can connect to all good people in this world who had to do the best they could with unfair circumstances put in their laps that they didn't want, Heavenly Parent. I just pray that for each and every single one of us that we can look, even though it's hard many times, that we can look beyond those difficult circumstances. We can forgive, we can give grace, we can love and embrace and have compassion, Heavenly Parent, because we really are all doing the best that we can. And we make mistakes. We make big mistakes sometimes. We have so many shortcomings, Heavenly Parent. We know that when you look at us, you see our good points, you see our potential, you know why we are the way we are. And you still love us, even when we turn our backs on you. So we know that if you're that way, then we want to be like you. We want to reflect you as your good sons and daughters, Heavenly Parent. Really create a community that embodies that level of grace and forgiveness too, Heavenly Parent. That's what everyone's looking for. That's what everyone wants. To be able to experience that in their families and in their homes, in their community, Heavenly Parent. So please guide us in that direction. Please help us to do the work that's necessary to embody those things, Heavenly Parent. I want to thank you even for these experiences in our life that are given to us, because through them we can grow, through them we can become more like you. And I offer this prayer in my name, Michael Adoni Hendrick, blessed Central Family. Amen and adieu. Thank you so much.